Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi, which is SUKKAH Daf Chaf. Now, perhaps it would make sense to go back to the Mishnah on Yutes Amud Beis to conduct a brief and rather essential review of the beginning of this sugya, which would allow us to continue into today's Daf. So at the end of yesterday's daf, we discussed the machzelas konim, this mat made of reeds. We really have three categories. We have those which were specifically made for specific purposes. For instance, you have a machzelas which was manufactured lishchiva, to be used as a mattress, to lie upon it, for reclining purposes, in which case it's certainly makabel tumah, it's a kli, and is unsuitable for SUKKAH use. SUKKAH needs to be something which is not makabel tumah. On the other hand, we have a machzelas which was manufactured to be used for sichuch, for covering, for shielding, for protection, not necessarily SUKKAH of your sukkah, but to be used for coverage, for shielding over the thatched roofs down there in Africa. So it's not a kli, it's not makabel tumah, and kosher for SUKKAH use. The third category is called stama, unspecified, undefined. It was not earmarked for any specific use. That's going to be today's sugya. We're speaking obviously about a town where the mats would serve a dual function. It would be sometimes used for sichuch, sometimes for shchiva, in which case we're not sure how to classify this mat. Now, there are two sizes. There's the gdoila, the large size mat, larger than what a person needs for personal use. And in that case, it is indeed more probable that the intended kavana when manufacturing that mat was to use it for sichuch and not for shchiva. Why would you make this huge mat to be used for shchiva? Whereas when you have a rather small size mat, personal size mat, it's more likely than not that the intended purpose was for shchiva. Okay, so let's start with the Mishnah again, in the middle of your Yutes Amud Beis. Machzelas konim gedola. You have a large size reed mat. Machzelas made of bamboos, of reeds. What is the halacha regarding SUKKAH? Also l'shchiva. If you manufacture it for the sake of shchiva, for reclining, for lying, in which case it's mekabelos tumah, ve'ein mesachachin ba. It's a kli. It has tumah capability, and you cannot use it for SUKKAH. However, li'sichuch, if he intended to use it for sichuch, so it's not a kli, and it's not makabel tumah. Misachachin ba, you can use it for SUKKAH. Ve'ein mekabelos tumah, and it's not a kli, it's not makabel tumah. So Tanakama presents it as follows: a large size mat, manufactured for shchiva purposes, is a kli and is possible for SUKKAH. Manufactured for sichuch purposes is not a kli and kosher for SUKKAH. Rabbi Yehuda Kessler makes no difference whether it's large or small. Achas ktana, v'achas gedola, whether small or large, it depends on the intended purpose. Also l'shchiva, if you did it for shchiva purposes, mekabelos tumah, ve'ein mesachachin ba, it's a kli, it's susceptible to tumah, it can't be used for SUKKAH. On the other hand, l'sichuch, if it was meant for coverage, misachachin ba, then it can be used for SUKKAH. Ve'ena mekabelos tumah. Says the Gemara, the wording of the Mishnah seems to be a bit difficult. Hagufo kasha. Look back at the Tanakama. The words are inherently difficult to understand. There is an inherent conflict in the words of the Tanakama. First, you begin by saying Amris, so l'shchiva mekabelos tumah. If it was meant for shchiva, it's makabel tumah. Ve'ein mesachachin ba, and it's unsuitable for SUKKAH. Time with asal shchiva. That's only because it was meant for shchiva. It was earmarked for shchiva. Hastama. Let's say it was just undefined, unspecified, nothing specific in mind. What's the halacha? And then we say l'sichuch. We assume it's been made for SUKKAH and it's not a kli, and it's kosher for sukkah use. So if it was meant specifically for shchiva, then it's a kli. But otherwise, we just assume a large size mat meant for SUKKAH. Then the Mishnah continues. L'sichuch. If it was specifically earmarked for coverage, then you can use it. Ve'enim mekabelos tumah. Tamad asal sichach. Apparently, because it was specifically earmarked for sichach. Since you had that in mind when you manufactured that mat, then you classify it as a sichach mat. Apparently, hastama. If it was not earmarked for anything, you had nothing in mind, then we have to assume that it's l'shchiva. It's meant for reclining, and it's a kli. And at the Reisha, we had a diuk going the other way. So we have conflicting implications. In the Reisha, we say, only if it's l'shchiva, earmarked for reclining, then we say it's a kli, but otherwise, if it was left unspecified, it's fine. We assume that it's meant for schach. In the Sefer, we say the other way around. Only if you had sichuch in mind, then you're okay, but otherwise, we have to assume the worst, that it was meant for a kli. Halei kasha, the answer is very simple. It depends how large this mat is. Kan b'gdoila, kan b'ktana. The Reisha is speaking about a large size mat, where it's more probable that it was meant for schach. So if you had shchiva in mind, then there's nothing to talk about. It was earmarked for shchiva tzikli. But otherwise, the default assumption is that it's schach and it's kasher. Kan b'ktana, it's a seifa, a small personal size mat, in which case the default assumption is that it's for reclining purposes. It's a kli, unless he specifically earmarked it for schach use. Continues the Gemara. Okay, you've explained the Tanakam. Let's skip over the parentheses. Let's go to Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer Omer, achas ktana, achas gdoila. Whether small or big, it makes no difference. It depends what it was designated for. Asal shchiva, meant for lying, mekabelos tumah, and mesachachin ba. It's a kli, can be used for schach. What is the diak? Tama the asal shchiva. Apparently, the concern is only because it was meant for shchiva. Then it's a kli. Hastama l'sichach. Otherwise, there was nothing specific in mind, then we assume that it's good. It's meant for covering, it's not a kli. So Rabbi Lezer doesn't differentiate between sizes. If it was earmarked for shchiva, then it's a kli. Otherwise, we could just assume that it's fine. Eimo seifa. So how does Rabbi Lezer continue? He says, asal l'sichach. If he specifically earmarked it for schach, mesachachin ba, then we can assume it's fine. Ve'ena mekabelos tumah. But that's only because he specifically designated it for schach. He had that in mind. Tamad asal sichach. It's only because he designated it for such. Stama. But if it was left unearmarked, undefined, undesignated, we have to assume that it's l'shchiva, that it's a kli. A minute ago, you just told me that stama is schach. So within Rabbi Lezer, we have a stira. What is the halacha of stama? Initially, Rabbi Lezer says, any mat, irrelevant of size, which was done l'shchiva, that's a kli. Mashma, that if it's left undefined, we assume that it's for schach use, it's fine. And then Rabbi Lezer continues and says, the only way it's good is if it was asal sichach. But if it's just stama, then it's a kli. We have to assume it's l'shchiva. So what is the halacha of stama? And here you can't answer. Depends on the size. Because he's clearly referencing both sizes as one. He's not being machalik. He's not differentiating between sizes. So what is the halacha of stama? Elama Rav says, Rav, I'll tell you pshat in the Mishnah. And Rashi explains that what Rav is doing, he's changing the pshat in the word l'sichach. Until now we figured l'sichach means it was done for the sake of covering. Says Rav, no. The word l'sichach means that we have the right to assume that it was made for covering and it's not a kli. So let's see. Elama Rav, b'gdoila kule amule pligi, when it's a large size mat, where chances are it wasn't meant for lying, it was meant for covering. All agree, whether Tanakam or Rabbi Lezer, they all agree that it's assumed to have been produced for schach, unless he indicated otherwise, but stama is fine. The question is regarding a personal size mat. Tanakam savar stam ktana l'shchiva. Tanakam is machmer. He says the stam by a small mat is presumed to have been l'shchiva and it's possible for schach. Blazer savar stam ktana nam l'sichach. He's mekel. Blazer's lenient. He says even a small size mat, which was left undesignated, undefined, unspecified, we assume it's l'sichach Apparently, Rabbi Lezer says, look, some people use it for lying, some people don't. So let's just assume that it's not a kli, unless you've indicated otherwise. So basically, according to Rava, Rabbi Lezer has come to be mekel, it's come to be lenient regarding a small size mat which was left unearmarked. Stam ktan. Tanakama is machmer, Rabbi Lezer is mekel. Now, how do we see this in the Mishnah? Explains Rava as follows. V'achikam. So we go back to the Mishnah. This is how we meant to read it. Mishnah begins, Machzel es akonim. If you have a reed mat, G'doila, a large size one. Oh, so l'shchiva mekablos tuma. If you specifically earmarked it for shchiva, of course, it's a kli, it's mekabel tuma, v'ein mesachichin bo. That's pashut. Now, let's stop and make a diuk. Tamad asa l'shchiva. That's only because he did it for shchiva, specifically earmarked it for shchiva. And the Mishnah continues. He's basically reading this into the Mishnah. When the Mishnah says, L'sichach mesachichin ba, it means that it was left undefined. It was left stama. And then we have a right to assume that it was made for coverage. Ha stama. Nasa kemisha asa l'sichach umesachichin ba. So the comment begins by speaking about asa l'shchiva and then proceeds to stama. He takes a large size mat, he does it for shchiva, of course it's a kli. But if it was not earmarked for shchiva, we have a right to assume, what's he doing making a large size mat, if not for schach use? And that's what the Tanakama meant when he says, L'sichach mesachichin ba. He didn't mean that he had that in mind. He earmarked it for sichach. Ha-stama, even just a stama, is nasa k'misha asa l'sichach u'mesachichin ba. We have a right to assume that since he didn't specify that he's using it for shchiva, the default assumption is it's for schach. Now, since the Tanakama only referenced a large size mat, l'shchiva, it's l'shchiva. Stama, it's l'schach. Apparently, when it's a personal size mat, then we can't just assume that a stam machzelas ktana was meant for covering. Right? Tanakama left it out. He specifically spoke about a gdoila. Because this halacha, that stam is kosher, only applies to a large size mat, we have a right to assume a large size mat, it's not for personal use, that's for schach. But a small sized mat, there the assumption is that it's l'shchiva. So whether he had shchiva in mind or he just left it undefined, let's assume that it's l'shchiva. So bottom line is, Tanakama holds, imachzelas ktana, stama, is l'shchiva. Here comes Rabbi Lezer, and he applies a kula. He says, any stam mat, even a small size mat, is presumed to be l'sichach unless indicated otherwise. V'as, let's skip over the brackets. V'as, Rabbi Lezer l'meimar, achas ktana, v'achas g'doila, stama k'shera, l'sichach. Whether large or small, doesn't matter. If he had shchiva in mind, of course, nothing to talk about. It's a kli. But if it was left undefined, and that's what Rabbi Lezer meant when he says, l'sichach mesachichin ba. Not that he specifically earmarked it for sichach. It means it was left undefined, unspecified. In which case he says we have a right to assume that it was meant for sichach, since some people use it for that. You have no right to make it a kli, make it tamei. And we say, stama kshera l'sichach. So according to Rava, there's one point of contention. A small size mat stama. Tanakama says pasal. Rabbi Lezer says kasher. If your approach is correct, Rabbi Lezer's wording seems a bit problematic. Why? What's Rabbi Lezer saying? He's turning to the Tanakama. You hold that a large size mat, stama, is presumed to have been manufactured for coverage, right? I want to add to that. The same halacha that applies to a large size mat applies to a small size mat. So, how should Rabbi Lezer address the Tanakama? The logical way would be to say, okay, just as you're being makel by a gdoila, I want to add ktana to that. There's no difference between gdoila, which is good according to you, and ktana, which is good according to me. How indeed does Rabbi Lezer address the Tanna Kama? The other way around. He says, achas ktana v'achas gdoila. The same that applies to a small applies to a big. It's not the way he should be speaking. If your approach is correct, Rabbi Lezer Omer, we find in the Mishnah, Rabbi Lezer says, achas ktana v'achas gdoila. Just as a small, so to a big one. He should have said it the other way around. Achas gdoila. The same halacha that applies to a large one, where stomach is good, v'achas ktana, v'boyele. Likewise a small one. That's how he should have expressed it. If he was trying to add the small one to the big one, the same halacha that applies to a large stomach applies to a small stomach, he should have said, well, whether big, whether small, same halacha applies. Instead, he went the other way, which doesn't really fit your approach. V'oid says Abaye, another problem. Keep pligi. In actuality, the machlok is between Tanna Kama and Rabbi Lezer is b'gedolah the pligi. It's pertaining to a large size mat, not a small size mat the way you presented it. Rabbi Lezer l'chumar. In fact, Rabbi Lezer is being machmer, not being mekel the sani, as we find in the Brayso. We discussed it back in Das Zayin. Machzelas hakanim b'gedolah mesachin bo. You have a large size mat which was undesignated, undefined. You can use it for SUKKAH. We assume that it's meant for coverage. So a large stomach is okay. On that, Rabbi Lezer disagrees. Rabbi Lezer Omer, im eina mekabel stuma mesachichin ba. You can only use it if you know with certainty it was meant for SUKKAH, and then it's not mekabel tuma. But if it's an unknown, you can't use it. It's pretty clear that Rabbi Lezer is coming to be machmer and say you cannot even use a large stomach. So the point of contention is a large stomach, and Rabbi Lezer is being machmer. Unlike you, Rava, who maintained that the point of machlekes was regarding a small stomach, and Rabbi Lezer was being mekel. Elam Rav Papa, I'll tell you pshat in the Mishnah. Rabbi Lezer is being machmer, and the point of machlekes is a large size mat stomach. Tanna Kama says it's okay. Rabbi Lezer says it's possible. Big Tana, when it's a small size mat, undefined, unspecified, kuli amule pligedes tamle shchiva, all agree it's presumed to be for shchiva and it's possible. Small size mat, personal size, meant for reclining, it's a kli. Ki pligi b'gedolah. The machlekes applies to a large size mat, which is stam, undefined, unspecified. Tanna Kama savar stam gedolah l'sichach. Large size mat, let's assume it wasn't meant to be used as a mattress, rather for SUKKAH and it's kosher. Rabbi Lezer savar stam gdoila nami l'shchiva. Rabbi Lezer disagrees. He says even a gdoila, if it's stama, since some people use it for shchiva, we have to take that into consideration and we cannot use it for SUKKAH. Umay asa l'shchiva de ka'amar. Now, how do we see this in Rabbi Lezer's words? You see, Tanna Kama is pretty clear. Tanna Kama starts by saying, a large machzelis, which was made l'shchiva, no good. Stop right there. Apparently, if it's stama, it's good. A large size stama is good. And Tanna Kama continues, a small one, which was meant for sichach specifically, is okay, but stama is no good. That's Tanna Kama. And Rabbi Lezer responds like this: whether small or big, asa l'shchiva, which means stama. Not that he had shchiva in mind. It was undefined, unspecified. Then we say it's no good. Right? Whether small, that's pasha, then even a big one. Stam, big one, no good. And Rabbi Lezer concludes and says, l'sichach, which means if he had sichach in mind, that's a different story. Then we say that is kosher. But if it's just stama, irrelevant of its size, whether small or even large, I'm being machmer, a stam g'dolah is l'shchiva. So again says the Gemara, umay asol l'shchiva de ka'amar. Rabbi Lezer says, if he manufacture it for shchiva, it's possible. Hachi ka'amar, you meant to say stam asiyasa nami l'shchiva. That the default assumption is l'shchiva. Even a stam is considered l'shchiva ad David l'sichach, unless he specifically expressed his intent and kavanah that it's being made for sichach. Otherwise, stama is no good, whether small or large. So bottom line is we had three approaches. We had the Havamina, which didn't really work out. We had Rava and Rav Papa. Rava's opinion was Machlekes revolved around a small size mat, which was stama. Undefined, undesignated. Tanakama says, small personal size mat, meant for lying, for reclining, it's a kli pasuk. Rabbi Lezer's Meikli says, no. Since sometimes these were used for coverage as well, we can assume it's fine. So, a machzelas ktana stama, Tanakama says okay, Tanakama says pasal, Rabbi Lezer says it's okay. Abai responded, well, Rabbi Lezer is being mekel, we find the Bryce, Rabbi Lezer is coming to be machmer. And Rav Papa responds by saying, yeah, indeed, the machlekes revolves around a large size machzelas stama. Tanakama says okay, Rabbi Lezer says it's pasal. Okay, so let's summarize the sugya, and perhaps refer back to the Mishnah as well and see how it all fits into the Mishnah. So we spoke about Machzelas Kana, we have Tanakama, Rebbe Lezer. The first approach in the Gemara, which really didn't work, was as follows. Tanakama speaks about Igdoila and then speaks about Aktana, two different sizes and two different halachas. Igdoila, if it's l'shchiva, it's possible. Stama is okay. Aktana, if it was l'sichach, then of course it's fine. But stama is presumed to be l'shchiva and it's possible. We couldn't work out Rebbe Lezer's shita, so we went over to Rava's approach, which was as follows. And the point of contention, the point of machlekes, is relating to a very specific case, small size mat, stama, right? Ktana stama. According to Tanakama, it's possible because it's a personal size mat. It's assumed to have been meant for shchiva. It's a kli and possible. Rabbi Lezer's Meikli says, even a ktana, if it's stama, since some would use it for schach, we have no reason to make it into a kli, and we could assume that it's fine. So how do we read it in the Mishnah? Well, like this. Tanakama will speak about only one size mat, a gdoila, just as we see in the words of the Mishnah. What's else? Kana gdoila. So if it's l'shchiva, it's mekabel tumah. And when the Tanakama uses the words l'sichach, which is okay, he didn't mean specifically l'sichach, he meant stama, which can be assumed for sichach. Right? So we're speaking about one mat, a large size mat, and we're contrasting between shchiva and stama, which the Tanakama refers to as l'sichach. And stama is fine. And the diuk, the implication, is that by ktana, which Tanakama is not addressing, but the implication is that ktana, which is a personal size mat, is assumed to be l'shchiva, even if it wasn't designated for shchiva. Even stama is no good. Rabbi Lezer responds by saying, whether it's ktana or this doila, doesn't matter. If it was specifically earmarked for shchiva, I agree, it's a kli. But if it was stama, and he uses the word l'sichach, which means we have a right to assume it's l'sichach because it was not earmarked for anything else, in which case we say it's kosher. And again, the point is that he's being machadish, even a personal sized mat, a ktana, if it's stama, it's okay. So according to Rava, by ktana stama, if machlekes, Tanakama says pasal, Rabbi Lezer says kosher. Abai asked, well, in the Brisa we see Rabbi Lezer being machmer by a gdoila stama. So Rav Papa responds by offering another pshat in the machlekes, where the point of contention indeed will be whether a gdoila stama is kosher. According to Tanakama, yes, a large size mat, let's assume it's for schacha. Well, as machmer, you cannot use it unless you prove that it was meant for schach. And the Mishnah reads like this. Tanakama speaks about two different types of mats. Begins with a gdoila. If it's l'shchiva, it's possible. Mashma, that if it's stama, it's okay. Large size mat, by virtue of its size, is presumed to have been meant for sichach. Whereas when it's a ktana, which is the second part of Tanakama, a ktana, if it's l'sichach, then of course it's fine. That's what he had in mind. But mashma, if it's just stama, a small size mat, is presumed to have been manufactured for personal use as a kli. Rabbi Lezer responds by saying, I don't differentiate between sizes. Small, big, it's all the same thing. If it's l'shchiva, which he really means a stomach, meaning that you have to assume it's l'shchiva, you have to take that chance into account. So when Rabbi says l'shchiva, he meant even if it's stomach, we have to assume that it's l'shchiva, in which case, katana or even a gedola is pasal. Whereas if he specifically had SUKKAH in mind, of course, there's no question that irrelevant of size, this mat is intended for coverage and not for kli, therefore kosher for your sukkah. So the point according to Rav Papa is that by a gedola stama, Tanakama says it's okay, Rav Lezer says it's possible. Continues the Gemara. Tan Rabbanan, Machzelas, we're going to have a third shita. A third shita which says all mats are fine. Even a small size mat stama, it's okay. Tan Rabban Machzelas shall shifa v'shal gemi. A mat made of these soft and pliable plants, materials. If it's a gdoila, mesachachin ba. So again, we're speaking that it's undefined. That's the whole sugya. We're speaking about a stump. He has something specific in mind. There's no question as to the status of that mat. But if it's unearmarked, undesignated, so if it's made of these soft materials and it's large in size, mesachachin ba. Why would he make a large one for personal use? Katana, if it's a personal sized mat, ein mesachachin ba. We assume it's meant for reclining and pasal for schach. Shel kanim v'shel chelas. Now we have a mat made of reeds, bamboos, chelas, some sort of other plant which has a hard stalk. So in that case, it's not necessarily meant for lying, for reclining. Gedula mesachachin ba. Rashi learns gedula, not gedula. Gedula, a braided one, in which case it's bumpy and uncomfortable. You can go ahead and use it, and even if it's a small size mat, it's braided. It's not meant for personal use. It's meant for shade and shielding. So it can be used for schach. Aruga, however, if it's woven, in which case it's smooth and comfortable, ein mesachachin ba. You can't use it because we're speaking about a small size mat, which is presumed to have been manufactured for shchiva. So this is in line with the Tanakama, who differentiates between who says that if it's stama, it's right. If it's stama, small stama, we assume it's for shchiva. Here comes the shita, which is very make. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosi, Oyman Mishum Aviv. Rabbi Shmuel quoted his father, who says, "Achazu v'achazu masachim ba." Whether it's braided, in which case it's bumpy and unsuitable for lying, or even if it's arug, woven, in which case it's smooth and suitable for shchiva, you can use it. And likewise, Rabbi Doisa concurred with his shita, in which case now we have three shitas. So let's summarize the three shitas again. We're speaking about a machzelas kanim, stum, undesignated, unearmarked. And the Gemara later will explain, we're speaking that it's bishar mekaymis, meaning in places where theoretically these mats can be used for two purposes. They serve two functions, as a schach and for shchiva. So that's number one. And also the Gemara will tell us we're speaking about mats which have no rim, no safa around its perimeter, in which case it's not really intended for a clay kibble to be used as a receptacle, as a container. So we have three shitas. Tanakama, Rabbi Lezer, which we had until now, and now we have Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Doisa, a third shita to be added to the equation. Okay, so let's go back to Tanakama, who said that a machzelas kanim stama, well, if it's small, ktana, we have to assume it's meant for shchiva. Now we have another aspect added in this brisa regarding a gedula, one which is braided and uncomfortable, in which case even if it's small, it's pretty clear it wasn't meant for lying and it's kosher. Whereas a machzelas kanim gedola stama is okay according to Tanakama. Rabbi Lezer takes issue with that. He says even if it's gedola, assume the worst and give it a din of a kli. Here comes the new shita, Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Doisa, who take a different approach. They say any of these mats, whether small or big, if it's stama, let's just assume that it's kosher unless it was designated for shchiva, you can go ahead and use it for your schach. Continues the Gemara Tanan Hasan. We learned in the Mishnah Maseches Idias Kol Chaytzoles, which the Gemara soon will interpret. So all these chaytzoles are metamet meimeis. According to Rabbi Doisa, These things are meant as kalim, utensils, which are potentially tmei meis. If it touches a meis, it becomes tummy, like any other kli. But since it's not meant for reclining, sitting, and lying on it, it's not going to get too much midras, which means that if a zav or a zava would sit, lie, stand on this item without even touching it, maybe there's something in between the zav and the item. So generally, if it's something which is meant to hold a person, a couch, a chair, which is meant for this purpose, then it receives this additional tumas midras from the zav. But if it's not meant for that, it's just a kli, a utensil meant for other purposes, for other functions, rather than supporting a person, then it doesn't have tumas midras capability. These chayitzoles, contra b'daisa, don't have that capability. They're just containers, they're just kalim. They can get tumas meis through touching, through carrying, but not tumas midras. Chacham Omer midras, they maintain these things are meant for sitting and lying and reclining, and they can have tumas medras. Medras in tmei meis loy, you mean only medras, and we don't treat it like a regular kli, in which case it can't get tumas meis? That doesn't work. If you have one, you certainly have the other. If you're a kli for medras, then certainly you have other tuma capabilities as well. But anantanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Kalamatame midras, metame tmei meis. Anything which has tumas midras has tmei meis. You can't have midras without tmei meis. Ema, rather, says the Gemara, you're right, af midras. Chachamim are adding on Reb Deisa, not only tmei meis as an ordinary kli, but even tumas midras, because we consider this thing to be designated for sitting, lying, and supporting a person as well. Okay, so these chaytzoles contra Reb Deisa are simple kalim, simple utensils which don't have midras, whereas contra Chachamim considered like something meant for lying on, reclining on, sitting on, and it has tumas midras. What are these chaytzoles? My chaytzoles. We have two versions. Amar Rav Avdimi Bar Hamduri, Mar Zubli. That's what it is. Okay, my Mar Zubli. What is that? Amar Rav Abba Mazabli. Rashi learns it's the knapsack of the roy of the shepherd, which technically could serve two functions. It can serve as a container, and also occasionally the shepherd would use it to nap on it as a pillow. So according to the Chachamim, it has that tumas midras capability. According to Rabbi Deisa, since it's not really meant for the shepherd to lie on, not meant to sleep on the job, so it doesn't really have that function. It's a typical container which has tumas meis, but not tumas midras. So that's one pshat in the word chaytzoles. Second pshat is Reb Shimon Lagish Omer machzoles mamish, real mats, plain mats. Perhaps chaytzoles because it's mini mats, as the Sfas Emes explains. So we're speaking about mats. And once again, the Chacham say a mat, it's meant for reclining, for lying on, therefore it's a midras. Rabbi Deisa maintains it's primarily intended for other usages, and therefore he says it's not mitame tumas medras, rather it's a kli. We're going to learn soon it has a rim, has a ridge around the edges, in which case it's meant for Kabbalah, it's meant as a container, and even if some people will lie on it, it doesn't really have a din of tumas medras. This is really in line with Rabbi Deisa earlier, who said that any mat, unless it was specifically designated for shchiva purposes, we can't just assume it was meant for that purpose. So again, Rav Shimon Lakish maintains chaytzoles amach tzoles mamish. V'az Rish Lakish tamei. In fact, Rish Lakish is in line with his opinion, stated elsewhere, that chaytzoles are mats. Da'amar Rish Lakish hareini kaparas Rabbi Yehuda Banav. Says Rashi 3 lines from the bottom. Hareini kaparas. I'm willing to accept on myself the kapara, the yisur and haboin olai should be the kaparosei Rabbi Yehuda Banav. You. Difficulties that I experienced should be an atonement on Rabbi and sons. It was a reference of endearment, of appreciation for all that they did for Klal Yisrael. I'm willing to experience kapara on their behalf. Says Rashi, V'loshen kavatu ze'ekshu masker aviv Rabbi lachmisas yitzarech le'meken. A person would refer to his father, who was Rebbe within the year, in this manner. Harin kabaras mishkavai. So although it was way after they were nifter, but he appreciated what they did for Klal Yisrael, and he expressed this term of endearment towards them. So again, Rish Lakish says, Hareini kaparas Rabbi Chia u'bonav. Also special about Rabbi Yehuda Banav, shebetchila initially, kish and ishtakha Torah Yisrael, when Torah began to be forgotten from Klal Yisrael, they started forgetting halachas. Allah Ezra Ezra came up from Bavel, beginning of Bayis Sheni, and he clarified, he reestablished the Torah. Chazav nishtachah. Then afterwards, some more halachas were starting to been forgotten. Allah Hillel Bavli v'yast. Hillel Bavli came up from Bavel. He was a Talmud of Shmai v'Avtalin. He came back and he reestablished the Torah. He clarifies things. Chazav nishtachah. Once again, there was shikha in Klal Yisrael. Alu Rabbi Yehuda Banav v'yistor. Rabbi Yehuda and his sons came up from Bavel, and they reestablished the Torah. They clarified things, and therefore Rish Lakish was so appreciative to Rabbi Yehuda Banav regarding what they did, and he used that lashon Avnei Kabbalas Mishkaveh. So, in fact, what was he referring to here? V'chein Omer Rabbi Yehuda Banav. So they explain like this. This is back to the machlokes regarding the chitzolis. Lo nechel ku Rabbi Deisa v'chachamim. There's no discussion between Rabbi Deisa and Chachamim regarding machzoles which were intended for reclining and sleeping, to be as mattresses, the ones in Usha. Shein Tmeis, of course, they're considered Tmei Medras because they're soft and earmarked for that purpose. So it's pretty clear, by the way, that Rish Lakish, Shimon Lakish, assumes that chitzolos are mats, right? So that's the connection here. He was the one who said mats, and we see that Rish Lakish indeed interprets the Mishnah as such. You see, he quotes Rabbi Yehuda Banav, who elaborate further on this concept of the chitzolos. It's pretty clear speaking about mats. So once again, the ones in Usha, which were intended primarily for sleeping, for shchiva, and for nothing else, of course, all agree they're Tmei Midras. On the other hand, Vishal Tveri, the ones made in Tveri, which are hard, rigid, nobody uses them for sleeping. Shein Ta'eris, certainly they're not meant for Medras, and they're going to be tar from Medras. Perhaps they can be used for other functions. We're speaking that has a ridge around the perimeter, in which case it's a container, but not meant for Medras. Aman nechelku. When does the machlekas apply? What's the case? What's the point of contention? Al sham makomis. Mats manufactured in other places. Mar savar kiven the leka de yosef alayu. Rabbi Deisa maintains, since most people don't use it for shchiva, the leka de yosef alayu, Rashi says most people are not meant to use it, don't intend to use this for shchiva, because it's very damyan, we categorize it as a tveria mats, in which case it's not considered Tmei Medras. And Rashi explains that, even if the Zav decides to sit on a kli which is not meant for sitting, you tell him, get up. Amoid v'nases mlachtenos, like the kli addresses the Zav, get off of me, I have to go, I have a job to do. Meaning something which is not earmarked for sitting and lying purposes does not have too much Midras capability. Rabbi Deisa maintains, all these mats manufactured in other towns, where although perhaps some people use them for lying, but since brave people are not ruggle to be miyachid for that purpose, it doesn't have a din of medras. Umar Savar was the Rabbanan hold, well, given the mikri yasv alayo, since at least some people do decide to use them for sitting and lying and reclining kedusha damyan, we treat it as the ones in Usha, in which case we give it a din of tumas medras, as Rashi on top. So the ones in Usha, shein tmeyas, that's pashut, af midras. The miyachadis is shchiven, it's meant for lying. Loyal tashvash acher, specifically meant for lying, and nothing else. On the other hand, you have the ones in Tveria. Ashal Tveria SUKKAH is saying, nobody uses it for shchiva. The question pertains to the gray area, places where some people use it for shchiva, but not most people. Most people don't designate their mats for sitting and lying, they use real mattresses. Therefore, Rabbi Deisa says it doesn't have too much medras, whereas Rabbanan say the mikri yosef, some will use it for lying purposes, and they designate it for that purpose. So we have to give it a din of tumas medras. Okay, so again we had a machlokes regarding chitzolos, which can carry one of two interpretations: either the shepherd's knapsack, which is certainly a container, but perhaps can be used for as a pillow as well. Then we have the chitzolos, meaning mats, perhaps small size mats, where we're speaking about a town where it's mostly used for SUKKAH, or I should say probably a kli, as a container, because the Gemara soon will tell us we're speaking that has a ridge at the end. So most people use it for that. Some use it for lying. So in both cases, we have something which carries a potential, a dual function. Chachamim say, okay, so we give it tumas medrash as well. Not only is it a container, we classify it as a medrash as well. This it says, since its primary function is for containment and not for lying purposes, it doesn't have tumas medrash, considered like a regular kli. It has other tumas, like tumas meis, etc., but not medrash. Says more. Now we're going to have a kasha, a contradiction between the most recent brisa, the most recent discussion regarding chetzoles, which according to all shittas is a kli. Even Rabbi Yehuda agrees that it's a container, and certainly wouldn't be kasha for SUKKAH. And what about that other brisa discussed earlier, where we had the machzeles, and Rabbi Yehuda says, can you use it for SUKKAH? What do you mean? It's a kli. Amar. So let's review. Kol hachetzoles mitamen tmemis. The Rabbi Yehuda